Welcome to the 2025 Naples International Film Festival here in Naples, Florida. We're here with the filmmaking team from Apollo 1, a really good space documentary. So our viewers at home who have not seen it, tell us a little bit about the documentary, then we'll jump right into it.
Well, the documentary is about a very pivotal event in the US space program that took place in the late 60s as the country was on this massive drive to reach the moon by the end of the decade. Which was not an easy thing, and it just galvanized the entire nation into working together to try and, reach this impossible goal.
What about the story of Apollo 1 captured you? What made you want to do this documentary?
Well, it was through a meeting with Sheryl's mother, Martha, who was very close to that story, as you can appreciate. And we just spent some time together talking about it, and I had just finished another film at that time, The Last Man on the Moon, about Gene Cernan. And the Cernan family and the Chaffee family were next door neighbors. And so, I just got to know Martha, and I guess one conversation led to another, and we thought, you know what, the Apollo 1 story has never been told in a personal way, the way that I could see it being done. And so I just began exploring possibilities with all the family members to see if they were up for it.
What I really loved about your documentary is what you just said. You told the story in a personal way, because a lot of space documentaries is very technical. It talks about the mission, the technical know-hows and the successes and failures, but you really focus on the family. And how did you do that? How important was that to you, but how did you get the families involved in wanting to talk about the personal story?
Well, firstly, I'm not smart enough to make all those, heavily intellectual science and historical films. I like a bit of it, but really, any movie is always, it's important for the audience to identify with the characters on the screen and just go on that journey with them. And so really, as I said before, I also don't like using a voiceover or a narrator where you in any way manipulate the story. I prefer to just research it, do some interviews and filming, and then, piece it together hopefully nicely with music and great visuals, and that's, what I did with this story, really.
How did you two hook up?
I met Sheryl's mum first, and then I think it was at an anniversary event at the Cape that I got to meet Sheryl for the first time, and I've been driving you mad with my emails ever since, haven't I?
Sheryl, tell us a little bit about your father and his great work in his life here in American history.
Well, my father actually was the youngest astronaut at the time, and he was only 32 years old, and so he never got to go into space. He was an excellent pilot, excellent father. I remember swimming with him, and but it's been a long time. But I just know he was a good man, and felt strongly about the mission going to space.
Growing up, what was it like being in that space family? That space family is small, it's intimate. What was it like being in that atmosphere in that space family growing up?
Well, like Mark said, the Cernans were our neighbors, and across the street were the Swikarts, and we were just a bunch of kids running around, doing things that all the other kids were doing back then. It was a whole different age than it is now, and so I don't think we really thought of our fathers as anything other than our father. He was Dad.
Well, at what age did you realize that Dad did something very special in life?
It was probably long after he died, actually, that I really understood. 'Cause I was 8 years old when he died, so I really didn't grasp the whole meaning of it all. And it was probably till I was in my teenage years or so.
Talk to me about putting the film together. You use archival footage, your music is good, you have interviews, so talk to me about the editing process. What was that like?
It was long, and there were days whether it was painful, but we had a plan. You know, as I said, I take the whole story, break it down into the building blocks of the scenes, and put all those postcards on a coffee table, and I just talk through it with the editor. We agree on the structure, and then we literally just get stuck into it. And you know, you assemble all the sound bites first, and then you populate those sound bites with images. Then you start adding music, and you do that through the whole film. And then you look at the whole film, which is probably at that point 3 hours long. It's still a bit of a mess, and you spend a couple of days being a little bit depressed about it, and then you dive back in again, and with every successive pass, which it gets sweeter and sweeter, and until then you reach a point where, okay, it's working pretty well, but it's too long. And then you have to go through this painful process of throwing some scenes away, which bring the running time down, but which hopefully don't impact the key story.
You've had a very successful festival run. You're at Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival, which is one of the oldest in the country, last week. What has the conversations been like with audiences after they've seen your documentary?
It ranges from you know, what brought you to this story, and I tell them it was a conversation with Sheryl's mom, and I guess my calling card was my previous film, and so we sometimes talk about that. I'm sometimes asked, why is it that an Englishman has to come over here and tell an American story? And I haven't really got the answer to that. I think it's just, you know, the way it played out.
Let me ask you about that, because, you know, Phil Collins, who's an Englishman himself, you know, is very enthralled with the Alamo. You know, is one of the largest Alamo collectors in the world. He has one of the largest collections. What is it about these American stories that people, people in Britain are attracted to? What is your opinion?
Well, they're very different from British stories, and I guess any nation gets a little bit bored with itself. And we are a very small country, you know, with a long history, and you know, we're kind of used to all that. But I personally, you know, I find America an absolutely fascinating country. You know, from coast to coast and north and south. You know, there's just so many different layers of American history, American characters and culture. It's like a big old ocean that is just nice to dive into and have a swim around.
We're here at the Naples International Film Festival here in South Florida. Florida is space country. We have the Cape nearby. We have the Space Center in Alabama nearby. Of course, Johnson Space Center's in Houston. What does it mean to have this film here at Naples in South Florida, to South Florida audiences to see kind of their own story?
It's you know, genuinely honored and feel very lucky to be here with Sheryl, with this film and everybody else that's in it, because you know, we are on the same state soil, you know, where a lot of the story took place. And yeah, it's great to be here. I mean, I was a kid in the 60s as well, and I lived through that time as a kid. You know, I watched all those spacey TV programs, played with all the spacey toys and all that kind of stuff. So somewhere in me, you know, that whole incredible time was there. But I think it took me until much later in my life to sort of revisit that once I'd got to know people who were very close to that whole amazing time in this country's history.
Lastly, what is the website? What are the social handles? How can we follow your successes?
The best thing you can do is probably just Google Apollo 1 film. Apollo 1 film. You'll find us on Facebook, and from...
Yeah.
That's right. I'm not going to compete with that.
No.
There's always one, isn't there?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Apollo 1 film on Facebook, you'll find us, and from there you'll find everything else.
Congratulations on such a great film, and thank you for allowing for us to see your dad's story. It was very
Thank you.
important to me.
Thank you.